If people are happily paying $1,000 for this 105mm f2.8 macro lens in 2023, why are others paying twice that for a lens that came out in 1993? I'll explain. The difference, of course, is they're two very different lenses. The 105 is in fact a fantastic macro lens. It's a one-to-one, fully internal focusing f2.8 powerhouse of a lens. It's also very light, very portable, very comfortable, very fast, very bright, and very sharp. Did I say very sharp already? It's that sharp. The Micro-Nikkor 200mm f4 lens is from 1993. It's carved out of a solid block of cast iron. It weighs twice as much as the other lens. It's not pretty. It breaks, and though this one hasn't. It's altogether a very clunky, noisy, unattractive lens. Why then will people pay twice as much to own one? Quite simply because it's a 200mm macro lens, and it's the sharpest macro lens in the world. They both are super complex, internally focusing lenses. The 105 has 16 elements in 11 groups. The Nikkor 200 f4 has 11 elements in 8 groups. This was one of the first lenses to come out with extra low dispersion glass in it. It has 2 ED elements, whereas the new Nikon has 3 ED elements as well as an aspheric. There's a little bit more in the way of geometric aberration with the older lens, but not much. They both have autofocus. One of them is slow, deliberate, and clunky. The other is fast, accurate, and a little weird. I'll explain that in a minute. The Z8 with the 105 f2.8 weighs the same as this lens, but this lens on this camera is a perfect balance, though it's heavy, definitely heavy. So why do people pay up to $1,700, $1,800 for this lens? The 200mm macro lens is a different experience in macro than any 100mm lens, to the same extent that no 50mm macro lens is going to give you the same experience as any 100mm macro lens. So all I'm going to do is walk around here in this pleasant area that I've come to before on occasion, and we're going to look for something to photograph, and then I'm going to try, and it's going to be hard with a macro subject, but I'm going to try to get pictures with both cameras of the same subject, same lighting and everything. There is a jumping spider on this big rock that I'm standing next to, and I'm going to start here, and then I'll check in with you in a little bit, and we'll see if we can get some photos to compare. One of the most obvious differences with the two lenses is the fact that one of them has best-in-class image stabilization, and the other one, well, it doesn't have image stabilization. And that's definitely one of the features that becomes immediately obvious when you start using the lens. The field of view is obviously much tighter with the 200. It makes finding your subject quite a bit tougher. I'm not a complete weakling, and I must say I find using the 200 quite tiring on my left arm, because you have to keep it constantly and completely braced. When you're shooting with it, if it has any motion whatsoever in your shoulder or your elbow, you're going to get movement, and there is nothing to counteract it. So keeping the camera well braced is quite exhausting on my left shoulder and left elbow, and that's absolutely not the case with the 105. Another thing about the 105 being composite, it's very light. It's not the least bit difficult to carry around or hold in a shooting position. It's probably too hot for insects. Something else that doesn't take long to become apparent is that when you are using the autofocus feature on the 200mm lens, it is slow as Christmas. Comparing the autofocus on the two lenses is a little bit unfair. I would consider the 200mm f4 to be a manual focus lens. The autofocus is not exactly useless, but many shots I missed today by trying to use the autofocus when I shouldn't have bothered. It just takes too long to acquire. It's too difficult to see what you're aiming for. And it has another very annoying feature. When my hand is on the focus ring, my index finger tends to be on the focus selector. And when I'm focusing, sometimes I'm accidentally turning the lens into autofocus or off autofocus. I mean, you'd get used to it, I'm sure, but yeah, until then, it's very irritating. You would not buy this lens for its autofocus. It just happens to be that the sharpest and best of the 200mm f4s has autofocus. That doesn't mean you have to use it. I'm not through taking pictures. I'm just through being able to stand the heat out here. So let's go back to the studio and try to figure out why people would spend all that extra money on a lens that's donkey's years old that doesn't have autofocus. There's got to be a reason. Let's go figure it out. Hey guys, it's the next day. I am finally recovered. I spent several hours last night going through the pictures that I took while I was out on safari in the boiling heat yesterday. I got several decent shots from the Z8 with the MC105, and I got, let me see, none from the 200mm f4 until I came home and took some test pictures of a clock. They were good, but this took me back to the first time I used this lens, and it reminded me of everything I had conveniently forgot about it. So I'm going to do something a little different, but I'm going to redo my day in the field with the 200 f4 because I did it all wrong. You cannot run and gun with the 200mm f4 lens. It is not made for that. It is not made to be used in bad light, handheld with no flash. It is impossible to keep a subject still enough to get a sharp picture unless you just have extraordinary luck. I'm going to instead go out with the same camera, the same lens, only I'm going to put a flash on it and I'm going to put a tripod under it. And I'm going to go out and I am going to find some things to photograph. And I'm going to do it the way this lens is supposed to be used. Slowly, deliberately, patiently. And let's see if we get any good photographs. which is the best lens, the 200mm or the 105? It depends on what you want to do with it. Tell me how you shoot macro, and I'll tell you which lens will please you. If you like to go out and get pictures, if you expect to come back with a full XQD card every time you go out, if you expect to be taking hundreds, if not thousands of pictures on a day trip, you probably need the Z lens. If you shoot in terrible conditions and you have a lot of wind to deal with, a lot of changeability of light, if you're going to be hand holding the camera all day long, you probably need the Z. If you're looking for something that is light and fast and bright and has all the bells and whistles, talks beautifully to a camera that can shoot at 20 frames a second, you probably need the Z. But if you're the kind of person that can go on a 6-week vacation in the Amazon and come back and say you didn't take a picture because you didn't see anything you really liked, or more realistically, you go out for the day and come back with no pictures, or you spend all day to get a picture and that picture is as good as you can take. If you're all about quality and not all about quantity, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you are either a fast photographer or a good photographer. That's not at all what I'm saying. If you consider it a reasonable workflow to miss most of your shots in order to capture the one superstar shot that you've been going after for that bug for donkey's years, if that's worth it to you to get a shot that is in image quality better than anything that I believe you're going to get out of the Z, then you need to get one of these lenses, the 200mm f4, because it's sharper than anything I've ever used. It's got creamier bokeh. It's just got a quality, the color has a quality to it that I just don't see with any other lens. But if that sounds like hell on earth to you, to wander around with 10 pounds of metal around your neck in the scorching sun, not to get a picture, don't buy this lens. Buy the Z, buy the 105, it's fantastic. It'll get pictures of everything. I just don't think it'll get as good a picture at the end of the day as the 200 will. I would say if I had the means, I would own both of these lenses because I am both of these photographers. There are days like yesterday when I have no interest in standing around waiting for everything to be right to take my shot. No interest at all. I was dying out there. And then there are days like today when the breeze picked up, I found an out-of-the-way place. I set up the camera and lens on a tripod. I framed up my subject and I stood there and I waited for over an hour for it to get in position, which it did. And these are the pictures. So I'm both of them. I mean, I love both kinds of macro photography, and most people probably do. But when it comes down to it, there is no comparison because they are not comparable lenses. They are both absolutely at the top of Nikon's game. I love the new lens, I love the old lens, but that's the only similarity that they have, is I love them both. But then again, I love a lot of things. Look, thanks for watching. Go buy both of these things. It'll only cost you, well, it'll cost you $3,700, but if you have a DSLR, go buy the Z8. You'll need that. Okay, that's it. There is no comparison. Different lenses. Have a good day. See you next time. Bye-bye.